Hello and welcome to Shorts in Psychology. In this video, I'll be defining prejudice, discrimination and stereotypes and explaining how these three are linked in the context of the ABC or tripartite structure of attitudes model. Every day, we spend time analysing and discussing things that happen to us, and we pay attention to how other people behaved. We make causal attributions, judgments about the causes of behaviour or an event, in an attempt to explain others' behaviour. But what happens if our judgments are based on misperceptions about other people? Prejudice is an attitude that is a conscious or unconscious prejudgment of someone that is unjustifiable and usually negative towards a group of people. Prejudice is usually based on characteristics such as culture, race, gender, religion, sexuality, or disability. Like all attitudes, prejudice is a mixture of beliefs, emotions, and predispositions to action. The beliefs and overgeneralizations that are made to produce a preconceived and generalized image of an individual or group are called stereotypes. Stereotypes can be based on various characteristics such as personality, appearance, or ability. By stereotyping, we infer that a person has a range of characteristics and abilities that we assume all members of that group have, regardless of variation. For example, adolescents are often stereotyped as being self-centered and lazy. Stereotypes are resistant to change, do not always carry an emotional tag, and do not automatically lead to intentional acts of abuse. They are used to simplify the world around us, enabling us to respond rapidly to situations due to a reduction in the amount of processing required, and thus aren't always negative. However, it's when stereotypes blind us to individual differences within a particular group of people that they become maladaptive, unfair, and abusive. Discrimination is an unjustified, negative, or harmful act directed towards members of a particular group based solely on the individual's membership of that group. Discrimination can take many forms. Explicit discrimination is intentional and conscious discrimination against a particular group of people, including physical violence, putting people down, ignoring, and exclusion. Less obvious, more unconscious discrimination is called implicit discrimination. Implicit discrimination includes reluctance to help, tokenism, and reverse discrimination. Implicit discrimination is often difficult to detect and can be unintentional. Let's quickly define the ABC or tripartite model of attitude structure before we apply it to prejudice, discrimination, and stereotyping. I'm only going to briefly define the model here. For more detail on the ABC model, watch my video on attitude structure linked in the comments below. As the name suggests, this model considers attitudes to consist of three components. The affective component is the emotional, feeling part of the attitude. The behavioural component refers to the actions we do in response to the attitude object. And lastly, the cognitive component refers to the beliefs and ideas we have about the attitude object. Therefore, if we apply the ABC model to explain the link between prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination, prejudice refers to the attitude's structure and its affective emotional component, as it is associated with negative emotions such as hostility, envy, fear, and antipathy. Discrimination is thus the behavioural component, as it is an unjustified, negative, or harmful act directed towards members of a particular group, based solely on the individual's membership of that group. Lastly, stereotypes are the cognitive component, as they consist of beliefs and a preconceived image of an individual or group that consists of a few representative characteristics. These characteristics are assigned to all members of that group solely due to their membership of the group. As a result, discriminatory practices may support stereotypes and prejudice. Stereotypes can lead people to become prejudiced, and stereotypes may be used by prejudiced people to support their findings. Let's illustrate this interaction using an example. Let's use the Karen meme to illustrate how prejudice, discrimination, and stereotypes are linked. While the exact origins of the Karen meme are uncertain, it became popular a few years ago as a way for people of colour, particularly Black African Americans, to satirize the class-based and racially charged hostility they often face. Karen is thus a slang term used as an antagonistic female character in memes. Karen is generally characterized as an irritating, demanding, and entitled middle-class white woman. Depictions include demanding to speak to the manager, being racist, or wearing a particular bob cut hairstyle. These general characteristics of a Karen is an example of a stereotype and the cognitive component of the attitude, where potentially any white woman sporting a blonde bob hairstyle could be labelled as a Karen, and thus assigned the other characteristics of being entitled and demanding, regardless of individual variation. Labelling someone as a Karen and assigning them these stereotypical characteristics will influence how we feel about this individual and could lead to prejudice. If we believe her to be entitled, demanding, and racist, we might feel contempt, frustration, anger, or resentment towards Karen. Both the Karen stereotype and the feelings we have about her will influence how we act towards her. This could be either explicit or implicit forms of discrimination, such as being reluctant to help, ignoring, excluding, or being the target of verbal abuse. The Karen stereotype can also lead to discrimination in the form of ageism or sexism. Now that we've looked at a general example, let's look at a past exam question assessing this concept. Here is a part of a question from the 2023 SACE exam. Pause the video to read the question and examine the graph. To answer this question, I would follow these 4 steps. Firstly, choose one of the groups represented in the graph. It's important to not over-answer the question by discussing lots of different groups represented in the graph, so I would focus on one and explain it in detail. Secondly, define what a stereotype is, which could be in the context of the ABC model, and give an example in relation to the group you've chosen. Explain how this could cause negative emotions and thus prejudice. And lastly, explain how this could be the basis of discrimination, using a specific example of how this group may be discriminated against. Pause the video while you now attempt to answer the question. Here is one example of a model answer. The group on the graph that I chose for my answer was old people. So to address the first part of the question, I have written, a stereotype is a generalized image of an individual or group based on a few representative characteristics that are assigned to all members of the group regardless of variation. For example, all old people are stereotyped to be frail, forgetful, and not know how to use technology like computers and mobile phones. We can link this to prejudice by saying if someone has these generalizations and beliefs about old people, they could feel disdainful, dismissive, or contemptuous towards them. This unjustifiable and negative attitude and emotions towards old people is prejudice. Finally, we need to explain how the stereotype about old people and prejudice towards them could be the basis of discrimination. The stereotype that old people are frail and forgetful could also lead to people being treated differently purely because they belong to this group and are old. For example, they may be excluded from certain events or activities if they are perceived as being too frail to participate. This is just one of the many possible ways this question could be answered. If you wanted to, you could describe each component more in the context of the ABC model too. Hopefully, this video has helped you have a better understanding of the link between prejudice, discrimination, and stereotyping, as well as how to answer questions related to these concepts. Please feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time for another Shorts in Psychology.